In 16th century plague-ravaged London, Portuguese doctor Rodrigo Lopez was accused of attempting to poison a patient, and not just any patient, but none other than the mighty Queen Elizabeth I. And Lopez wasn't any ordinary doctor. He was her head physician, who would become the inspiration for one of Shakespeare's most memorable characters. Welcome to Crimes from History. England in the 16th century was no stranger to bubonic plague. No, we'd been lumpy and bumpy, pukey and dying from it for over 200 years, when in 1563 another outbreak hit Derby, then Leicester, then London. This would mark the first of many more plague outbreaks in Britain, continuing to the late 1600s.
Bring out your dead! Here's one. Ninepence. I'm not dead. What? Nothing. Here's your ninepence.
So difficult was life in 16th century England that in 1544 the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer, begged from lightning and tempest, from plague, pestilence and famine, from battle and murder, and from sudden death, good Lord, deliver us. Plague orders were written which acted as guidelines for how to manage the population to reduce the spread of disease. Within these orders, it was written that all idle persons and begging people, whether men, women or children, or other masterless vagrants, were to be disposed in the 4 hospitals of London. Those that were aged, impotent, sick, sore, lame or blind to be taken to St Bartholomew's for treatment. And if you had been one of those patients taken to St Bartholomew's Hospital, you may well have met physician Dr. Rodrigo Lopez. He was born into a Jewish family in Portugal around 1517. Rodrigo's father, Antonio, had been doctor to Portuguese King John III, but had been forced to convert to Christianity a few years before his son's birth, not only in order to keep his prestigious job and citizenship, but possibly even his life. It's speculated the family secretly practiced Judaism behind closed doors, something Rodrigo is said to have continued throughout his life, whilst maintaining the facade of a Christian lifestyle. In fact, Rodrigo was forced out of Portugal when he was suspected of doing exactly that, and, now a qualified doctor himself, moved to London in 1559, aged 42. He became the house physician at St Bartholomew's Hospital, just in time for yet another outbreak of the plague. Welcome to England, Rodrigo. Now get to work.
You're killing me!
Being a practicing Jew was as illegal in England as it had been in Portugal, so Rodrigo joined the Church of England and changed his name to Roger. Rog was held in high esteem by his colleagues, one of whom was eminent surgeon William Close, who remarked that Lopez showed himself to be both careful and very skillful in his counsel in dieting, purging and bleeding. Rodrigo married Sarah Annes, a fellow Jewish Portuguese immigrant's daughter, and they went on to have 6 children. Life was ticking along nicely, and the good doctor had started to treat more and more prestigious folk, elites such as the Queen's spy master, Sir Francis Walsingham, and her rumoured fancy man, Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester. Through these connections, in 1581, he managed to bag the position of Physician-in-Chief to Queen Elizabeth I and her household.
Have a care with my name, you will wear it out.
Rodrigo was able to move his family into a swanky pad in Holborn. He received perks from his job, including a monopoly on the importation of aniseed and sumac, so he could make his medicinal tinctures. He also netted a life pension of £50 per year, 10 grand in today's money, plus land and a share of taxes collected in
Worcestershire, Worcestershire sauce. Is that how you say it? That cannot possibly be right.
Worcestershire. But trouble was brewing. First, in 1584, an anonymously authored Catholic pamphlet circulated in London, suggesting that Lopez the Jew was aiding Robert Dudley in poisoning and for the art of destroying children in women's bellies. There's no proof this was the case, but it shows Rodrigo was beginning to get noticed by people who wished him harm. The next event to stain Rodrigo's character happened because of his involvement with a group of Portuguese exiles living in England. Being fluent in at least 5 languages,
You're a bit of a clever clogs, aren't you?
he became something of a conciliator between Queen Elizabeth and one of these exiles, a man named Dom Antonio, who was in a bitter struggle with Philip II of Spain to claim the Portuguese throne. In 1586, 2 servants to Dom Antonio were arrested on suspicion of being double agents working for the Spanish monarchy, and correspondence was discovered claiming Rodrigo may well be persuaded into poisoning his friend Dom Antonio. This alleged plot never amounted to anything, and in 1590 Rodrigo wrote to the Spanish, possibly on behalf of Walsingham, to suggest opening peace negotiations. I mean, I understand he was an intelligent guy, but he's the doctor, he's not a politician. I don't think negotiating peace treaties is covered in medical school. Did he have any experience? Or did they just think, oh, this guy speaks all the languages, let's entrust the future of these countries with a precarious history of conflict to him? You know, the guy who burns off our verrucas. Good luck, Doc, don't f it up. Well, entirely predictably, he did, because he continued to write to the Spanish after Walsingham's death in 1591, and without the English government's knowledge, which is a big ol' no-no. He accepted gifts from the Spaniards, and although there was no evidence he plotted against England or her queen, it sowed the seeds of his demise. Foolishly, he incurred the wrath of a former patient who was another of Elizabeth's fancy men, Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, when he gossiped to Dom Antonio and his mates that he treated Essex for a sexually transmitted disease. Whoopsie! Essex was told by one of the group about the boob, and from that moment on, Essex was after Rodrigo's head. You don't bandy about tales of Essex and his itchy bits without repercussions, apparently. Essex compiled some sketchy evidence against Rodrigo, accusing him of collusion with the Spanish against the English, and claimed he was in the pay of King Philip II. Off he scampered to inform Elizabeth that her doctor was dodgy, but pretty quickly she dismissed Essex's accusations. He was fuming and vowed to get revenge on Rodrigo.
I am untethered and my rage knows no bounds!
But nobody would listen to him, at least not yet. 2 years passed. Itchy Essex continued to dig about, looking for dirt on his nemesis. It would be during a chance search and interrogation of Rodrigo's messenger that Essex would find a most dangerous and desperate treason within correspondence between Rodrigo and Spanish officials targeting Queen Elizabeth I. The executioner should have been Dr. Lopez, Essex wrote, the manner by poison. There had been intelligence that King Philip of Spain was going to deploy 3 Portuguese to kill Her Majesty and 3 more to kill the King of France. But there was no information around who the mysterious and murderous 3 would be. Being a level-headed and fair man, Essex began torturing anyone and everyone he could get away with torturing, and managed to gain confessions remarkably similar to what he'd suspected, that Rodrigo was one of the 3. What a coincidence! Rodrigo was arrested and taken to the Tower. Ah, the Tower of London. What a beautiful, terrifying, iconic, horrifying, charming, unnerving symbol of England's past. Where to begin? Well, the tower was built as a military hold by William the Conqueror in 1078, and it's been utilised as many things over the years. Its best known use is as a prison in one form or another, but it's also been used as the Royal Mint for imprisoning money, a menagerie for imprisoning animals, a records office for imprisoning records, an armoury for imprisoning arms, a barracks, that would be the fanciest shoe shop ever. It's also been used as a royal residence for imprisoning royals, which it did, actually. A number of high-profile prisoners were held in the tower, including royalty. There's Sir Walter Raleigh for treason, Guy Fawkes for treason, Lady Jane Grey for treason, Anne Boleyn for treason, and because Henry VIII hadn't invented divorce yet, Rudolf Hess for being a Nazi, and the Cray twins for being scumbags. The tower is famously home to beefeaters, or yeoman warders as they're officially known. Ravens live there too. It's said if the 6 ravens leave the tower, London will fall. So they've had their wings clipped because they're not going anywhere. The crown jewels are housed at the tower as well, but don't try to touch them or you'll get shot. Back to Rodrigo. When threatened with torture, he confessed to plotting to poison the Queen. He quickly took it back, but the damage was done. His case was further weakened when his letters to the Spanish were revealed, along with testimony that he'd donated money to a secret synagogue in Antwerp. On the 28th of February 1594, Rodrigo was tried by a commission headed by Essex, who had finally cornered his prey. Congratulations, Essex! But it was still the 16th century. There was no cure for crotch rot, so have you really won, Essex? Have you? Rodrigo maintained his innocence, but prosecutor Sir Edward Coke branded him a perjured, murdering villain and a Jewish doctor worse than Judas himself. I didn't know Judas was a Jewish doctor. Rodrigo was convicted of high treason and sentenced to death. Whoa, if he didn't like the thought of torture, he's going to hate the methods of execution on offer. It would seem that Queen Elizabeth wasn't too convinced by Rodrigo's guilt, as unusually, she waited over 3 months to sign the death warrant. When she did, she allowed Sarah Lopez to keep her husband's estate and granted their son a £30 annual allowance. Certainly not the actions of someone who believed Rodrigo may have been trying to murder her. As far as we know, Elizabeth didn't try to stop the execution, however, and on the 7th of June 1594, Dr. Rodrigo Lopez, head physician to the royal household, was hanged, drawn, and quartered at Tyburn. Before his grisly end, he declared that he loved the Queen as well as he loved Jesus Christ, which, considering it was widely assumed he was secretly a practicing Jew, raised a mocking laugh from the crowd. Over the years, there have been accounts from various Spanish officials that Rodrigo was innocent and that no such plot to poison the Queen was ever devised, but that hardly helps him now. Rodrigo remains the only royal physician executed in English history. There's a strong argument that Rodrigo and the hype around his trial at the time was the influence for William Shakespeare's character Shylock in The Merchant of Venice. As was the case for all Londoners during that era, Shakespeare would have spent a good chunk of his life in quarantine while the city around him was ravaged by plague. Theatres were closed to reduce the chance of infection, a result the religious community were pleased about. A preacher at the time quipped, "The cause of plagues is sin, and the cause of sin is plays." There speaks a man who's never been on TikTok. Shakespeare made the most of his time in quarantine, famously penning King Lear during one of these lockdowns. Having said that, he didn't have Netflix, crisps, or an Xbox to distract him like the rest of us. Shakespeare's portrayal of a greedy and manipulative Jewish moneylender who hates Christians and gets his comeuppance was certain to, and did, like Rodrigo's trial, rouse the interest of the masses. It contributed to an ongoing climate of anti-Semitism and anything that wasn't white Christian. Jews were reduced to a stereotype and proved to be a convenient scapegoat. They were even blamed for spreading the Black Death, though little is said about the Jews who, like Dr. Rodrigo Lopez, spent the majority of their working lives risking themselves to treat its victims. And that's it. Please consider subscribing if you'd like to hear more of this type of thing. Thank you very much for listening. Sweet dreams.